Welcome back. 2 weeks ago, Governor Ron DeSantis signed a series of bills that stripped the term climate change from many state laws. The bills also reversed other climate-friendly policies. For instance, the state will no longer be required to consider climate change as it develops energy policy. Another bill bans the construction of offshore wind turbines and cuts grants to programs that encourage energy conservation and renewable energy. Earlier this week, I spoke to Susan Glickman, who has been advocating for renewable energy in Florida for decades and helped craft many of the policies DeSantis has now repealed. Susan, thank you very much for taking the time. I look at what Governor Ron DeSantis did, and I realize that you had been instrumental for a number of years in sort of creating some of these policies that he's now tried to undo. Give me your first 30,000-foot reaction to what the governor has done.
What the governor is doing by overcommitting Florida to natural gas, we are already 75% reliant for our energy generation by fossil gas. And we bring that in from out of state. In fact, we send $74 billion a year out of state to bring in fuel from elsewhere. So if we got more efficient in the state and we relied more on solar energy and battery storage, we'd be keeping those energy dollars right here at home. So it's a concern for consumers' pocketbooks, and it's a concern for our environment and our warming planet.
Now, some of this seems to be just performative. For instance, he made a big point of saying that the bills that he signed will prevent wind turbines from being just off our beaches, so we won't see ugly wind turbines, generating electric power. I don't know of anyone who was actually planning on building wind turbines off Miami Beach or any beaches up and down the coast of Florida. I don't think that was on the table. How much of this is performative, though, and how much of this do you think actually affects substantive policy when it comes to investment in renewable energy, for instance?
That's right. When Governor DeSantis was running for president, we saw him take actions to slow down the electrification of transportation, for instance. So he took away, vetoed a bill that was going to allow local governments to look at the total cost of ownership when they're purchasing fleets. So a transit bus that's electric is going to save $300,000 over the life cycle of that bus. So by vetoing that bill, which passed in a completely, bipartisan manner, he's really, causing your taxes to go up. So those savings, there was transportation dollars that he wanted to send back. And yes, Florida does not have sustained onshore winds, and there is zero likelihood that anyone's going to build wind turbines within a mile to the shore. So that was really, political posturing.
What's interesting is the history of this. A lot of these policies were started when Charlie Crist, at the time a Republican, was governor and was holding climate crises events and summits and talking about these issues and creating some of these policies to invest so that we weren't overly reliant on oil and natural gas in the state of Florida. When Governor Scott became Governor Scott, he repealed a lot of it and actually forbid anyone from even talking about the phrase climate change or using it in any sort of context. But when Ron DeSantis was elected in 2018, he came in, he pushed forward with a resiliency officer to talk about and deal with the impacts of climate change, not wanting to get into necessarily the question of whether it's man-made or how it's made, but recognizing that Florida is vulnerable. And so he's been given credit for focusing energy on trying to make the state more resilient by, as I said, creating a chief resiliency officer, also investing in water quality. But now we see this. How do you explain the evolution of Ron DeSantis?
Well, some of it can be just chalked up to politics. But to the governor's credit, he has given out about $2.5 billion toward vulnerability assessments and looking at flooding and contending with that. But where that leaves Florida, because you cannot adapt your way out of climate change. It is the equivalent of walking into your bathroom, the sink is overflowing, and you grab those towels off the hook and you start to mop up the floor, but you never turn the faucet off. So this bill that he signed into law is going to increase gas infrastructure. And so we're already way over reliant on gas. People's bills have gone through the roof. All of the investor-owned utilities have either raised rates in the last 3 years. Both Tampa Electric and Duke Energy are coming in for additional rate increases. So it's very concerning. Even going back to when Jeb Bush was governor, it was 2005, we were 48% reliant on gas. And out of that time, they pushed bills to diversify our fuel mix by looking at, and there were about 7 proposals to build coal-fired power plants, which never happened, and also to allow utilities to charge in advance for new nuclear power plants. So that cost Florida Power and Light customers hundreds of millions of dollars, and Duke customers more than $1 billion, and they never saw any energy out of that. And I'm mentioning that now because one of the provisions in the bill that the governor just signed is to begin to explore what they call small nuclear reactors. The only small nuclear reactor project in the entire country was NuScale, and it was just canceled because the cost went up 53%. That's very, very concerning because they told us in Florida that nuclear plants would be inexpensive, 5 or 6 billion. And when they canceled the plants, they were 25 billion. And the first nuclear power plant in the country just got turned on in Georgia. It is the most expensive power plant in the world. So that is not how we want to meet our energy needs. In addition, no country in the world knows what to do with the waste. So the bill is very concerning. Everyone needs to sort of hang on to their wallet. And we need to invest in energy efficiency, solar, keep those energy dollars here at home.
Yeah, let me jump in there for a second. So, all right, we're over-reliant on natural gas and fossil fuels. Nuclear is problematic because of both the cost and what to do with the waste. So what are some of the answers? You were just sort of talking about hardening homes and making them more efficient. Where does FPL, Duke Power, how are they doing in terms of making, Floridians save money by having more fuel efficiency in their homes, either through windows or other things that they can do to make their homes more efficient?
Actually, they fight that. Every 5 years in Florida, we set conservation goals. And out of 53 utilities nationwide, Florida Power and Light is 52 out of 53 in offering efficiency. Tampa Electric is 40, Duke is 47. But we could meet as much as a third of our energy need by becoming more efficient and saving people money. And so that protects your pocketbook, and that also protects the environment. But we don't do that because investor-owned utilities like Florida Power and Light get a guaranteed range of a rate of return on all their capital expenditures. So they want to build power plants. So if they capture all the cost-effective efficiency, first off, they sell less electricity, which they don't want to do, but it also makes it harder for them to argue to build power plants. And remember, Florida Power and Light's parent company and Duke own a pipeline that brings gas into the state. So they want to sell gas. They want customers for their pipeline. And really that Sable Trail pipeline coming from Alabama to Orlando, Governor Rick Scott voted to speed up the permitting for that pipeline. He had an investment in the pipeline. He and his wife had almost $750,000 investment in Next Era Energy Partners, and they're starting to look at liquefied natural gas. That's why the bill provisions that talk about expanding natural gas storage facilities are very concerning. They're concerning, again, from price point and also environment.
Where does solar fit into this?
Solar is cheap now. Solar costs have dropped about 90% in the last decade. And of course, we are the Sunshine State, so we have, significant solar radiance. And the other piece of that puzzle is battery storage. So battery storage is starting to come on, to expand, and the costs are coming down there as well. So that's important. So energy efficiency is 24/7. We have a lot of solar opportunity here in Florida, and we need to put solar on roofs.
Are we taking advantage of that solar opportunity? Do these bills encourage it or sort of lead us away from it?
We've got about 4% solar. We can do a lot more. The utilities are embracing what we call utility scale solar, but we also need to do more solar on your roof, on the roofs of nonprofits, businesses, and local governments. So it's starting to happen. But the problem is, if you're paying these exorbitant, energy bills, you get locked in, right? We get locked into gas. Once the Public Service Commission approves a power plant, we're going to pay for that no matter what. And those can become stranded assets. So we need to upfront figure out the lowest cost way to meet our energy need and protect our environment at the same time. So solar is growing, but not fast enough.
Susan, I could talk about this all day with you, but I think that's all the time we've got for right now. We'll certainly follow up with you. Thank you for your time.
You bet, Jim. Thank you.
We'll be right back after the break.